The agenda this week sat down with writer Wesley Morris to talk cultural criticism and examine the strength of the union movement in Ontario. The agenda's Week in Review begins assessing the state of question period at Queen's Park.
For you, what was the question period experience like?
Well, I used to actually sort of enjoy question period, quite frankly. I mean, there were days it wasn't as much fun, but it's kind of the cut and the thrust, and for me it was can you sort of bat them out of the park if they're sort of throwing something at you, sort of thing. So I used to find it sort of interesting, stimulating, challenging, a little bit of fun, but also an opportunity to get what you think your message is across.
Did you find it useful?
Yeah, I think so. Now, I mean, things have changed a lot since, it's been a while since I was there. But
24 years since you were first elected.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay. Thank you for reminding me about that. It doesn't feel that long. But, I used to be surprised how many people actually watched. The media still takes clips and things like that off what you say in the House. It was also, too, I mean, it's a temperature gauge about where an issue is and how an issue is playing. And it's also, frankly, a really major accountability. Like, if you can't stand up and explain what your government is doing or defend what your government is doing in that venue, then you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. And so for me, it's an accountability mechanism that, American politicians just have no idea. Walking through the scrum, because it's not only a question period itself, you have to usually, walk through a scrum going in or going out with the media there. And it really is a daily accountability exercise.
Should we hear from the enemies
Absolutely.
of the people right now? Okay.
We are for the people's lead.
For the people. There you go. As you watch it, what do you think prevents question period from being a more useful exercise than it is?
Well, I'm like Janet. I actually enjoy watching question period generally. I like the political theater. I like watching politicians on their feet and seeing what they can come up with and how they respond. Now, I think some of the problems that are occurring right now is what's happening at Queen's Park, especially. It's often described as a toxic atmosphere. And we talked about how personal some of the comments and some of the insults have become. I mean, you look at some of the vitriol that was directed at Kathleen Wynne, for instance, and that still is, even though she occupies just that one corner seat of the legislature.
She gets booed.
She does,
Yeah.
And it's calmed down a bit since the election, but it does seem there's this air of the constant campaign that's happening, and it's not about governing or governance. It's about showing up your opponent, and that goes both to the opposition and the government. So there is this toxicity that's happening as well. The issue, we always talk about it's not question period. It's question period, not answer period.
Not answer period.
But I think just the way that it goes completely off topic, that some of the leaders or the MPPs are able to just completely dismiss the substance of a question and move on to talking points. And I bring up the example of recently when the Premier Ford was asked about abortion, for instance, and he directed that question to Energy Minister Greg Rickford, who talked about the carbon tax. And that was just a total missed opportunity for the government to answer what is a serious question that people in Ontario and across the country want to hear an actual answer to.
What does Henry Jacek want to end here? He wants to end the constant standing ovations, the constant table thumping, the constant applause, all of that constant stuff.
Hear, hear.
You agree? You agree? Get rid of all that?
Absolutely, because two things are really important. I'll give you an example of what happened. Quebec had an all-party meeting with the speaker. The speaker's a friend of mine, and he said, I'm going to try this. They voted themselves to stop doing the clapping and the desk thumping. They didn't do it. They got more questions. You get more questions, and then the speaker doesn't have to stop the clock to punish it doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. Now, if there is a very important point that's made on behalf of Ontario or something worldwide happens, an applause for somebody that does something good, no problem. But this robotic, I gotta stand and applaud, no matter what, no matter who says it. I even caught people behind the dais telling everybody to stand up and applaud. They had to be told to do it.
Really?
So get rid of it.
They were actually orchestrating the choreography.
Yeah. Get rid of it.
Earlier days, a standing ovation was for Nelson Mandela. It was for Archbishop Tutu. It was on the evening of the budget presentation. And lastly, when a member had announced that he or she was retiring.
So a rare special occasion.
Rare
Yeah.
special
Makes sense.
occasions.
It was supposed to mean something.
Yes, yes, that's right. It means nothing now.
No,
It
that's
a good
cheapens the
point.
moment now
Yeah.
because it happens so frequently.
Part of the union agenda as well, for many unions anyway, is a kind of a social justice agenda that is more than just local. In fact, it embraces global issues. What's your view on that?
Well, look, if unions in Canada were voluntary, like they are in almost every other country in the world, I would take no issue with the unions being heavily involved in the social policy agenda. I wouldn't certainly dare to speak as to what a union or a group of members wish to do. They can spend as much time or as little time on whatever it happens to be. But I do believe that one of the reasons why the union density rate has declined in Canada is because unions are increasingly focusing on issues that don't bear a lot of resemblance to the concerns of their members on a day-to-day basis. And I think that if I were giving some advice to unions, it might be to stick to the main job of collective bargaining on behalf of their members, as opposed to getting involved in anti-Israel BS at international tribunals,
I think you mean,
which happens all the time.
I think you mean BDS.
Well, actually, I did mean BS, but that's.
Okay.
But these
Okay.
these are the kinds of things that I think alienate a lot of potential union members from belonging to or supporting their individual union.
Okay, Stephanie is doing a great job
yeah.
preventing the steam from coming out of her ears right now. But go ahead. Yeah.
If I just could, I think that actually the evidence that we have shows that that's not actually correct. That Canadians actually see the labor movement playing a really important social justice role. They support that role for unions. And in fact, I think it is a contradictory position because often unions are criticized for only looking out for their own members, right? By focusing only on collective bargaining. Many people criticize unions for quote unquote selfishly putting their own economic interests ahead of customers or recipients of services. And so I think that they're, in this logic, they're kind of trapped. Either they only focus on the narrow bread and butter issues, or they have a broader social justice role that is in the public interest. And I just think it's not an accurate reflection of what Canadians expect and want from the labor movement, what motivates people to unionize, which actually increasingly is about dignity, and it is about respect, and it is about the transformation of the broader society, as well as their own economic situation.
Let's find out from a guy who's actually trying to do that, trying to unionize. Thanks for your patience, Ivan.
So what I would say is, for example, I'm an organizer just organizing bike couriers in Toronto, Foodora Bike Couriers, yet Cup W, the Union of Postal Workers, is supporting us. They had a huge rally where I was shown so much support from these postal workers whose jobs, in a sense, don't really have anything to do with my struggle. So really what that shows me is that people understand that these issues go across Canadian society. And they see that, when other workers are being taken advantage of, that brings everyone down. So it's actually advantageous for everyone to support other workers in their precarious conditions, regardless of how close together they are. Going back to something you said earlier, Dan, something like my job, I feel like I'm almost back in 1919. That's why, this is so important to someone like me. I meet bike couriers every day who are injured on the job, or they have close calls, or their bikes get stolen. There's just so many issues of violence.
Ivan, can we understand that a little better? How many hours a day are you on that bike?
I work 40 hours a week, so probably a good chunk of that, 30-ish, is on the bike.
And
I ride everywhere anyway, so.
Right.
Yeah.
You wear a helmet?
Yeah.
Good. How dangerous is your job?
Really dangerous. I think it's more dangerous than being a police officer or a construction worker or a fireman, because we simply don't have any of the protections or respect that those professions get.
What's happened to you on the roads?
Well, for me, I broke my arm in September.
How?
I was cycling on the bike path, believe it or not, and I just got in a collision with another cyclist.
With another cyclist?
Yeah, with another cyclist.
Okay, I was waiting for you to tell
I
the
know.
story about how somebody opened their door on
I
you.
know.
And that,
That's happened to me too, but didn't break my arm those times.
were you on the job when you broke
Yes.
your arm? You were. So that was I mean, could you file a WSIB claim or
I
something
did,
like that?
and
Yeah?
it was
Okay.
awful. I ended up getting $210 a week.
How helpful was your employer in all that?
Really minimal, bare bones. Like they have to help me. Foodora has to give the WSIB information, but they didn't do anything more than what they had to, other than like a couple emails.
When we talk about cancel culture, what do we lose as a society when we do cancel certain people out?
That's a really interesting question, and I don't actually know, because one thing you would lose is the voice of the person who is, I mean, depending on what the thing they're called on for being, like the reason they're being asked to be canceled. I mean, that matters. I think that the artist, him or herself, matters. But you lose the voice in the work of that person. I mean, I'm trying to think of a more, like, let's say that, well, I don't know. It's really easy. Like Bill Cosby, the fallout of the accusations against him basically amounted to having his entire, at least the television work, removed from streaming services. So these companies decided for us whether or not this is a person we wanted to choose to have in our lives. And I think that, I don't know, there's a part of me that really would have liked to have been forced to make that choice for myself, as opposed to having Netflix or Hulu or whoever tell me that it's good for me that I don't have to watch this person. Whereas I actually think that in the case of The Cosby Show, that show's value and its importance is so much bigger and greater and more significant than Bill Cosby.
Because all those actors, the people who worked on the show, because the show's not being shown anymore.
Right. I mean, it hurts them
I know.
financially.
Yes. But also, I guess what we came to believe was they showed us a different side of what it is to be a Black family, a successful Black family. I think we all grew up watching it.
Yes.
And I just noticed that all the people that I named are Black.
Yes.
Do you think that more Black people are targeted when it comes to cancel culture?
No, but I do think that a lot of the people who are accused of these sorts of things happen to be Black. I have not really successfully worked out the degree to which I'm uncomfortable with, because we're talking about like, in some cases, criminal behavior. We're talking about the morality of people who make art that we love. To the degree that race matters, I think it matters only if what you're seeing is Black people being persecuted and, Black people being prosecuted more than white people.
That is the Agenda's Week in Review for this Friday, June 7th, 2019. You can see all of those conversations in full at tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.